The earth quivered beneath Priscilla Garner's feet just moments before the tunnel collapsed, burying her in darkness so complete she couldn't see her own hand in front of her face. The Silver Moon Mine had been her father's legacy, and now it might become her tomb. Ezekiel Porter wiped the sweat from his brow as he guided his horse down the dusty trail toward Silver Moon Mine, unaware that his life was about to change forever. It was 1876, and California's mining towns were still booming with the promise of fortune. San Francisco had grown from a small settlement to a thriving metropolis, but here in Silverado, 50 miles east, life remained rugged and unforgiving. Ezekiel Zeke, to everyone who knew him, was returning from delivering a herd of cattle to a ranch outside Sacramento. At 32, he had built a reputation as a reliable cattleman and occasional bounty hunter, his 6-foot frame and broad shoulders making him an imposing figure. His dark hair curled beneath his Stetson, and his eyes, a piercing blue, missed little. As he approached the mine, an unusual commotion caught his attention. Men were running, shouting, panic evident in their movements. Zeke spurred his horse forward, arriving just as a cloud of dust billowed from the mine entrance. "What happened?" he demanded, dismounting in one fluid motion. A miner face streaked with dirt and sweat turned to him. "Cave in, the main shaft collapsed. Anyone inside?" Zeke's heart raced with sudden concern. "Miss Garner, she went in to check the new silver vein about an hour ago." Zeke had heard of Priscilla Garner. After her father died the previous year, she had taken over running the mine, something unheard of for a woman. The miners respected her, though, for her knowledge and determination. "Has anyone gone in after her?" Zeke asked, already removing his coat. "Too dangerous," the mine foreman, Walter Bailey, interjected. "We need to shore up what's left before anyone goes in, or we risk another collapse." "How long will that take?" Zeke demanded. "Hours, maybe all night. She might not have that long." Zeke grabbed a lantern from a nearby post. "I'm going in now." "You'll get yourself killed," Walter protested. "Then send for the doctor," Zeke replied grimly. "For her and for me." Without waiting for further argument, he strode toward the mine entrance, tying a bandana around his nose and mouth. The dust was still thick in the air, and rocks continued to settle with ominous creaks. "Wait!" A young miner ran up with a pick and shovel. "You'll need these." Zeke nodded his thanks and plunged into the darkness. The main shaft was largely intact for the first 100 yards, though debris littered the ground. As he ventured deeper, the devastation became more apparent. The wooden supports had splintered, allowing the ceiling to partially collapse. "Miss Garner." He called out, his voice echoing through the tunnel. "Can you hear me?" Only silence answered him. He continued forward, climbing over fallen rock, squeezing through narrow passages where the tunnel had nearly closed. The air grew thicker, harder to breathe, but he pressed on. Nearly a quarter-mile into the mountain, he found the main collapse. The tunnel ahead was completely blocked with rock and timber. "Miss Garner," he shouted again, pressing his ear against the rockfall. For a long moment there was nothing. Then faintly he heard a voice, weak but unmistakable. "Help, I'm here." Relief washed over him. "Are you hurt?" he called back. "My leg is pinned," came the muffled reply. "I can't move." "I'm coming for you," Zeke promised. "Just hold on." He assessed the collapse. Starting at the top might trigger another cave-in. He would need to work from the side, creating a tunnel just large enough to crawl through. Setting the lantern where it would provide the most light, he began digging with the shovel, carefully removing rocks and dirt. When he encountered larger stones, he switched to the pick, working methodically to avoid destabilizing the ceiling further. Sweat soaked through his shirt as he worked, the air growing more stifling with each passing minute. His muscles burned, but he refused to slow his pace. "Keep talking to me," he called to Priscilla. "Tell me about yourself." Her voice came back, stronger now. "There's not much to tell. My father was Jonas Garner. He founded this mine 15 years ago. And now you run it," Zeke said, grunting as he heaved aside a large rock. "Not by choice initially," she admitted, "but someone had to keep it going." "That's admirable," Zeke said. "Most women would have sold it." "This mine was my father's dream," she replied. "I couldn't just abandon it." As they talked, Zeke continued to dig. An hour passed, then two. His hands blistered and bled, but he persisted. The tunnel he was creating was barely wide enough for his shoulders, but it was progressing steadily toward Priscilla's voice. Outside the mine, Walter had organized a team to begin proper shoring of the tunnel, but they were far behind Zeke. Unwilling to risk moving too quickly, 3 hours into his rescue effort, Zeke broke through. His lantern illuminated a small pocket in the collapsed tunnel, and there, pinned beneath a fallen timber, lay Priscilla Garner. She was younger than he had expected, perhaps 25, with auburn hair that had come loose from its pins, and now framed a face that, despite being smudged with dirt and marked with a small cut on her cheek, was strikingly beautiful. Her green eyes widened at the sight of him. "You came," she whispered, as if she hadn't truly believed anyone would. "Of course," Zeke said, squeezing through the narrow passage he'd created. "Let's get you out of here." He examined her situation. Her right leg was trapped beneath a heavy timber, which in turn was pinned by fallen rock. He would need to move the rocks first, then lift the timber. "This might hurt," he warned her, reaching for the first rock. "I can handle it," she assured him, her jaw set with determination. Zeke worked carefully, removing the rocks one by one. Priscilla bit her lip to keep from crying out when the timber shifted, sending fresh pain through her leg. "Almost there," he encouraged her. Finally, the last rock was clear. Zeke positioned himself to lift the timber. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded, bracing herself. With a mighty heave, he lifted the timber. "Can you pull your leg free?" Grimacing, Priscilla dragged herself backward, freeing her trapped limb. Zeke immediately dropped the timber and knelt beside her. "Can you move it?" She flexed her foot tentatively. "It's not broken, I think. Just badly bruised." Relief flooded through him. A broken leg would have made their escape much more difficult. "We need to get out of here," Zeke said, glancing nervously at the ceiling. Small pebbles occasionally rained down, indicating the collapse wasn't entirely settled. "I don't think I can walk," Priscilla admitted. "You won't have to." Zeke gathered her in his arms, lifting her as gently as possible. She was lighter than he expected, or perhaps adrenaline made her weight seem inconsequential. "The passage is narrow," he explained. "I'll go first, pulling you behind me until we reach a wider section." He eased back into the tunnel he'd created, then reached back for her hands. "Hold tight." Priscilla gripped his wrists, and he began to crawl backward, pulling her along. The rough ground scraped against her injured leg, but she made no sound of complaint. They had progressed about halfway through Zeke's makeshift tunnel when a low rumble began. Dust rained down, and the walls seemed to shift. "Move," Zeke shouted, pulling her more quickly. They scrambled through the narrow passage as the rumble grew louder. Just as they reached the wider section of the original tunnel, the makeshift passage collapsed behind them. Breathing heavily, they stared at the fresh cave-in. "That was close," Priscilla whispered. "Too close," Zeke agreed. "Let's not tempt fate again." He lifted her once more, cradling her against his chest, and began making his way back toward the mine entrance. The journey was slow, as he had to navigate the debris-strewn tunnel while carrying Priscilla. As they neared the entrance, they heard voices calling. "In here," Zeke shouted. "We're coming out." Moments later, they emerged into the late afternoon sunlight. A cheer went up from the gathered miners as Zeke carried Priscilla from the mine, both of them filthy, exhausted, but alive. The company doctor rushed forward, directing Zeke to bring Priscilla to the mine office. Inside, he gently placed her on a cot and stepped back to allow the doctor to examine her leg. "You're a lucky woman, Miss Garner," the doctor pronounced after his examination. "No broken bones, though you've got some nasty bruising and a few deep cuts that'll need watching." "Thank you, Dr. Mitchell," she said, then turned her gaze to Zeke. "And thank you, Mr. Porter," he supplied. "Ezekiel Porter, but everyone calls me Zeke." "Mr. Porter," she said formally, though her eyes held warmth. "You risked your life for a stranger. I'm forever in your debt." Zeke shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Walter interjected from the doorway. "They wouldn't have. The rest of us were too cautious. If we'd waited to shore up that tunnel properly, Miss Garner might not have made it out alive." Priscilla reached out, taking Zeke's hand. Her touch sent an unexpected jolt through him. "I don't know how to thank you properly," she said. "No thanks needed, Miss Garner," Zeke replied, though he made no move to withdraw his hand from hers. "Priscilla," she corrected. "Please call me Priscilla." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of how quickly life could change, of how strangers could become bound to one another in the most unexpected ways. The moment was broken by Dr. Mitchell clearing his throat. "Miss Garner needs rest," he announced. "And Mr. Porter should have those hands looked at." Zeke glanced down at his hands, seeming to notice for the first time the cuts and blisters that covered them. "I'll be fine," he started to say, but Priscilla interrupted. "Please, let the doctor tend to you. You were injured saving my life." Unable to deny her, Zeke nodded and allowed Dr. Mitchell to clean and bandage his hands. "You should stay in town tonight," Priscilla told Zeke when the doctor had finished. "The Silver Moon Company owns the hotel. I'll make sure you have the best room." "That's generous but unnecessary," Zeke protested. "I insist," she said firmly. "It's the least I can do." Recognizing the futility of arguing with her, Zeke acquiesced. "One night," he agreed. "I have business in San Francisco I need to attend to." Priscilla nodded, though a flicker of disappointment crossed her face. "Of course. Walter will show you to the hotel." As Zeke followed Walter from the office, he found himself reluctant to leave Priscilla's presence. Something about her drew him, her courage, her determination. Perhaps simply the connection forged in those dark hours underground. The Silver Moon Hotel was a relatively new building, 3 stories of solid construction that stood as a testament to the mine's prosperity. The room Zeke was given overlooked the main street of Silverado, a bustling thoroughfare despite the late hour. After washing away the mine dust and changing into clean clothes from his saddlebags, Zeke headed downstairs to the hotel's dining room. To his surprise, Priscilla was there, seated at a corner table. She had also cleaned up, her auburn hair now neatly arranged, though she was still wearing the same dress, the hem torn and dirty. Her face, free of dust, revealed delicate features and a natural beauty that made Zeke's breath catch. She spotted him and waved him over. "I didn't expect to see you here," Zeke said as he took the seat across from her. "The doctor said you needed rest." "I rested," she replied with a small smile, "and then I became hungry. Besides, I wanted to thank you properly." "You already have," Zeke assured her. "A room for the night hardly seems adequate repayment for my life," she countered. "At least let me buy you dinner." Before he could protest further, a waiter approached with 2 plates of steak, potatoes, and green beans. "I took the liberty of ordering," Priscilla explained. "The cook here makes the best steak in 3 counties." The meal was indeed excellent, and conversation flowed easily between them. Zeke told Priscilla about his cattle business, how he'd started with just a few head 5 years earlier, and now, regularly drove herds to Sacramento and beyond. In turn, Priscilla shared stories of growing up as a miner's daughter, learning the business from her father, and the challenges she'd faced taking over the mine after his death. "It hasn't been easy," she admitted. "Some men refuse to take orders from a woman, no matter how knowledgeable she might be." "Their loss," Zeke said sincerely. "You've clearly done well with the mine." "We have," she agreed. "The new silver vein I was checking when the cave-in happened looks promising. It could be the richest strike we've had in years." "Is that why you went in yourself?" She nodded. "I wanted to see it firsthand. My father always said a mine owner should know every inch of their claim." "A dangerous philosophy," Zeke observed. "Yes, well, I've learned my lesson," she said ruefully. "From now on, I'll leave the underground work to the miners." As they finished their meal, Priscilla's expression grew more serious. "There's something you should know," she said. "The cave-in wasn't an accident." Zeke's eyebrows rose. "What do you mean?" "The support timbers were tampered with," she explained. "Cut partway through so they'd fail when enough weight pressed on them." "You're saying someone tried to kill you?" Zeke's hand instinctively moved to the revolver at his hip. "Not me specifically," Priscilla clarified. "I don't usually go into that section of the mine. It was likely meant for the night crew to slow production." "Why would someone do that?" Priscilla sighed. "The Silver Moon has competitors. The most aggressive is the Western Star Mining Company. They've been trying to buy us out for months, and they're not above using underhanded tactics." "Have you reported this to the sheriff?" Zeke asked. "Sheriff Collins is in Western Star's pocket," Priscilla said bitterly. "He'd do nothing." Zeke frowned. "That complicates things." "It's why I've hired additional security," she said. But apparently, it wasn't enough. Zeke considered this information. His plans to leave for San Francisco in the morning suddenly seemed less important. "I could stay a few days," he offered. "Help you figure out who's behind this." Priscilla's eyes widened with surprise, then warmed with gratitude. "You would do that?" "I owe you for the room and the excellent meal," he said with a slight smile. "Besides, I have some experience with tracking down troublemakers." "Your bounty hunting background might be useful," she acknowledged, "but I couldn't ask you to delay your business." "You're not asking. I'm offering," Zeke said firmly. "And my business in San Francisco can wait." The truth was, the prospect of spending more time with Priscilla appealed to him far more than he wanted to admit. There was something about her strength, her intelligence, her beauty that captivated him. "Then I accept your offer," Priscilla said, her voice soft. "Thank you, Zeke." The way she said his name sent a warmth through him that had nothing to do with the coffee he was drinking. "You should get some rest," he said, noticing the fatigue in her eyes despite her efforts to hide it. "It's been a long day." She nodded, rising carefully from her chair. Though she tried to hide it, Zeke could see she was favoring her injured leg. "Let me help you," he said, moving to her side. "I can manage." She started to protest, but swayed slightly as she put weight on her leg. Without another word, Zeke swept her into his arms for the second time that day. This time, however, there was no urgency, no fear, just the unexpected intimacy of holding her close. "My room is on the second floor," she murmured, her cheeks flushing slightly. Zeke carried her up the stairs, acutely aware of her soft breath against his neck, the subtle fragrance of lavender that clung to her despite the day's events, and the way she fit so perfectly in his arms. At her door, he set her down gently, maintaining a steadying hold on her elbow. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "My pleasure," he replied, and meant it. For a moment they stood there, closer than propriety dictated, neither willing to step away. Zeke found himself wondering what it would be like to kiss her, to taste the sweetness of her lips. But it was too soon, the connection between them too new and fragile. He stepped back, breaking the spell. "Good night, Priscilla," he said. "I'll see you in the morning." "Good night, Zeke," she replied, her eyes holding his for a moment longer before she entered her room and closed the door. Zeke returned to his own room, his mind filled with thoughts of auburn hair and green eyes, and the mystery of who might want to harm the remarkable woman who possessed them. Morning came with a brilliant sunrise that painted the mountains gold. Zeke woke early, his body accustomed to dawn starts. After dressing, he headed downstairs to find Priscilla already in the dining room, dressed in a fresh blue dress, her hair neatly arranged. "You're an early riser," he remarked as he joined her. "Mining doesn't wait for the sun," she replied with a smile. "How did you sleep?" "Well enough," he said, though in truth, his dreams had been filled with collapsing tunnels and Priscilla's voice calling for help. Over breakfast, they discussed their plan for the day. Priscilla wanted to return to the mine to assess the damage and speak with her foreman about increased security. Zeke suggested they also make discreet inquiries in town about Western Star's activities. "You ride?" Zeke asked as they left the hotel. "Since I was a child," Priscilla confirmed, "though I might need help mounting today." She gestured ruefully at her injured leg. Zeke arranged for horses from the livery stable, selecting a gentle mare for Priscilla. True to her word, she needed assistance mounting, and Zeke's hands lingered perhaps a moment longer than necessary at her waist as he lifted her into the saddle. The ride to the mine took them along a winding trail that climbed steadily into the foothills. Priscilla pointed out landmarks as they went, a stream where gold had first been discovered, the remains of an abandoned claim, the spot where her father had decided to establish the Silver Moon mine. "He had a feeling about this place," she explained, "said the mountain spoke to him." "And was he right?" Zeke asked. "The first year was lean," she admitted. "But then they struck a rich silver vein and the mine has been profitable ever since." As they approached the mine entrance, Zeke noticed the increased activity. Miners were busy shoring up the damaged section of tunnel, while others were clearing debris. Walter Bailey approached as they dismounted, his weathered face creased with concern. "Miss Garner, you shouldn't be up and about yet," he scolded gently. "I'm fine, Walter," she assured him. "How goes the repair work?" "We've stabilized the main tunnel," he reported. "Should be able to resume limited operations by tomorrow." "And the new vein?" "Still accessible from the south tunnel. Initial samples confirm what you saw. It's rich, Miss Garner. Possibly the best strike we've had." Priscilla nodded, satisfaction evident in her expression. "Show me the timbers that were tampered with," she requested. Walter led them to a shed where several broken support beams had been laid out. Even to Zeke's untrained eye, the sabotage was evident. Clean saw marks cutting partway through the wood, positioned where they wouldn't be immediately visible once the timbers were in place. "This was deliberate, all right," Zeke said, running his fingers over the cuts. "Professional work, too. Someone knew exactly how much to cut to ensure the timbers would fail under pressure." "Any idea who might have done it?" Priscilla asked Walter. The foreman shook his head. "We've had a few new hires in the last month, but they're all local men with good references." "Could someone have sneaked in after hours?" Zeke suggested. "Possible," Walter conceded. "We have night watchmen, but they patrol the perimeter. If someone knew the routine, they might slip past." "Double the night watch," Priscilla instructed. "And I want every support timber in the mine inspected before full operations resume." "Already being done," Walter assured her. "I've got our most experienced men checking everything." Priscilla turned to Zeke. "What do you think?" He considered the situation. "This took planning and inside knowledge. I'd like to learn more about Western Star's operation." "Their main office is in town," Priscilla said, "but you won't get much from them directly." Sometimes what people don't say is more revealing than what they do, Zeke replied. I think I'll pay them a visit this afternoon. They spent the next few hours at the mine, with Priscilla checking ledgers and discussing operations with Walter while Zeke observed the repair work. He also took the opportunity to chat with various miners, asking casual questions about recent events and new faces around the mine. By midday, they had learned little of value, but Zeke had formed a favorable impression of the Silver Moon operation. The miners were loyal to Priscilla, speaking of her with respect and even affection. It was clear she had earned their trust, no small feat for a woman in a man's world. As they rode back toward town, Zeke shared his observations. Your men think highly of you, he told her. That's rare in my experience. I try to treat them fairly, she replied. My father taught me that a mine is only as good as the men who work it. Wise man, Zeke commented. Did he also teach you about the business side? Some, she said. I learned the rest on my own after he died. There were those who thought I should sell, that a woman couldn't possibly run a mining operation. But you proved them wrong, she smiled, a hint of pride in her expression. We've increased production by 20% in the last year, and with this new vein, we'll do even better. No wonder Western Star wants to buy you out, Zeke said. You're cutting into their profits. It's more than that, Priscilla explained. The Silver Moon sits on what geologists believe is the richest part of the silver deposit. If Western Star controlled our mine as well as theirs, they'd dominate silver production in this region, making their owner very wealthy, Zeke surmised. Exactly. Marcus Caldwell already has significant influence in the county. With control of both mines, he'd be practically untouchable. Caldwell, Zeke repeated, the name stirring a memory. Tall fellow, salt and pepper beard, fancy dresser. Priscilla looked at him in surprise. You know him. We've crossed paths, Zeke said grimly. In Sacramento a few years back. He was involved in a land dispute that turned ugly. Nothing was ever proven, but a small rancher who refused to sell ended up dead in a suspicious accident. That sounds familiar, Priscilla murmured, her expression troubled. They reached town and stopped for lunch at a small cafe. Over bowls of hearty stew, they continued their discussion, keeping their voices low. If Caldwell is behind the sabotage, he's not likely to stop after one failed attempt, Zeke warned. I know, Priscilla acknowledged. But what can we do? Without proof, we can't go to the authorities even if they weren't already in Caldwell's pocket. We need to catch him in the act, Zeke said, or find someone willing to testify against him. Neither will be easy, Priscilla observed. Caldwell inspires loyalty or fear. Everyone has a weakness, Zeke replied. We just need to find his. After lunch, they parted ways. Priscilla headed to the assay office to discuss the samples from the new vein, while Zeke made his way to the Western Star Mining Company's office. The building was impressive, 2 stories of brick with large windows and ornate trim, a clear statement of the company's prosperity. Inside, a polished wooden counter separated visitors from several clerks working at neat desks. Zeke approached the counter, adopting the demeanor of a prospective investor. Good afternoon, he greeted the young clerk who came forward. I'm interested in learning more about Western Star's operations. I represent some San Francisco investors who are looking to expand their mining portfolio. The clerk's expression brightened. Of course, sir. Let me get our business manager. Moments later, a slender man in an expensive suit emerged from a back office. Harold Winters, he introduced himself, extending his hand. Business manager for Western Star. How can I assist you, Mr. Porter, Zeke supplied. Ezekiel Porter. Mr. Porter, please, come through to my office where we can speak privately. Winters led Zeke to a well-appointed room with leather chairs and a large desk covered with neat stacks of papers. "Now, what can I tell you about Western Star?" Winters asked once they were seated. For the next half hour, Zeke listened as Winters extolled the virtues of the operation, their modern equipment, experienced workforce, and promising future. Zeke asked questions about production rates, expansion plans, and local competition, watching carefully for Winters' reactions. When he mentioned the Silver Moon mine, a subtle change came over the manager's expression, a tightening around the eyes, a slight tension in his posture. "A smaller operation," Winters said dismissively. "Woman-owned, you know. Garner's daughter took over after his death last year. They've been lucky with a few good strikes, but nothing compared to our systematic approach." "I heard they recently discovered a significant new vein," Zeke remarked casually. Winters' eyebrows rose slightly. "News travels fast," he said. "Yes, there are rumors of a new strike, but I'd take that with a grain of salt. Miss Garner has been known to exaggerate to attract investment." The implication was clear, and false Zeke had seen the samples himself, and Walter's assessment had been confirmed by other experienced miners. "I understand there was an accident at their mine yesterday," Zeke continued. "A cave-in." Now Winters looked genuinely surprised. "I hadn't heard," he said. "Was anyone hurt?" "The owner was trapped but rescued," Zeke replied, watching closely. "There's talk it wasn't an accident." Winters' surprise seemed to deepen. "Sabotage, that's a serious accusation." Either the manager was an excellent actor, or he genuinely hadn't known about the cave-in. That suggested either Caldwell kept such tactics from his business manager, or Western Star wasn't responsible after all. "Just rumors," Zeke said with a shrug. "Mining towns are full of them." The conversation turned to investment opportunities, with Winters providing figures and projections that painted Western Star as a lucrative venture. Zeke feigned interest, promising to relay the information to his investors. As he was leaving, Zeke noticed a calendar on Winters' desk with a notation for that evening: dinner with MC, 7 p.m. Grand Hotel. Marcus Caldwell would be in town tonight. Zeke found Priscilla at the assay office, deep in conversation with the assayer about mineral content and processing methods. She looked up when he entered, her face brightening in a way that made his heart skip. "Good news?" he asked. "The best," she confirmed. "The new vein is even richer than we thought. Mr. Henderson says it could be twice as productive as our current main shaft." The assayer, a bespectacled older man, nodded enthusiastically. "If these samples are representative, Miss Garner, you're sitting on a fortune." "Let's hope they are," Priscilla said, though her confident smile suggested she had little doubt. As they left the assay office, Zeke shared what he had learned at Western Star, including the dinner meeting with Caldwell. "This could be our chance," he suggested. "To observe Caldwell, maybe overhear something useful." "The Grand Hotel dining room is quite public," Priscilla pointed out. "They'll hardly discuss sabotage over soup and salad." "Perhaps not," Zeke conceded, "but Caldwell might meet with others before or after dinner, and in my experience, men like him tend to feel invulnerable in their own territory. They get careless." Priscilla considered this. "It's worth a try," she agreed, "but we'll need a reason to be there without arousing suspicion." "Leave that to me," Zeke said with a smile that made Priscilla curious. That evening, Zeke appeared at Priscilla's door dressed in his finest clothes, a dark suit that, while not new, was well tailored and gave him a distinguished appearance. He had trimmed his beard and slicked back his hair, transforming from rugged cowboy to respectable businessman. Priscilla, too, had made an effort. She wore a deep green dress that complemented her eyes and auburn hair, which she had arranged in an elegant style that framed her face beautifully. "You look stunning," Zeke said sincerely as she opened the door. A faint blush colored her cheeks. "Thank you. You clean up rather well yourself." He offered his arm, which she took, and they descended to the hotel lobby. The Grand Hotel was Silverado's finest establishment, catering to wealthy visitors and the town's elite. Its dining room was known for excellent food and discreet service. "I've reserved a table," Zeke informed her as they entered the hotel. "As Mr. and Mrs. Porter, visiting from San Francisco." Priscilla's eyes widened at this deception, but she played along seamlessly when they were greeted by the maitre d', "Mr. and Mrs. Porter, welcome," the man said with a bow. "Your table is ready." He led them to a corner table that offered a good view of the entire dining room while remaining somewhat secluded. Zeke held Priscilla's chair for her, his hand briefly touching her shoulder as she sat, a gesture that might be expected from a husband, but which sent an unexpected warmth through her nonetheless. "Mr. and Mrs. Porter," she whispered once they were alone. "A married couple attracts less attention than a single man and woman dining together," Zeke explained. "And it gives us a reason to linger over dinner while waiting for Caldwell to arrive." The strategy proved effective. They were served without rush, and their quiet conversation drew no particular notice. Zeke told stories of his adventures as a young cowboy, making Priscilla laugh with tales of his early, clumsy attempts at cattle driving. In turn, she shared memories of traveling with her father as he sought the perfect mining claim, describing the beauty of the untamed wilderness and the colorful characters they had encountered. As they were finishing their main course, Marcus Caldwell entered the dining room, accompanied by Harold Winters and a third man Zeke didn't recognize. Caldwell was as Zeke remembered him, tall and imposing, his salt and pepper beard meticulously groomed, his clothing expensive and fashionable. The trio was seated at a table across the room, well positioned to be seen by other diners. Caldwell clearly enjoyed being acknowledged by the town's citizens, nodding regally to those who greeted him. "That's Caldwell," Priscilla asked quietly. "He looks more like a banker than a mining magnate." "He started in banking," Zeke informed her. "Moved into mining when he realized there was more money in controlling the gold and silver than in merely holding it." They observed discreetly as Caldwell and his companions ordered and began their meal. The third man, Zeke noted, seemed deferential to Caldwell but was clearly not a servant or employee. A business associate, perhaps, or a potential investor. "You recognize the third man?" Zeke asked Priscilla. She studied him for a moment, then shook her head. "He's not local." Their own meal concluded, they lingered over coffee and dessert, maintaining the appearance of a couple enjoying an evening out while keeping Caldwell's table in their peripheral vision. The mining magnate and his companions were deep in conversation, occasionally leaning closer over the table, though their voices remained too low to overhear from across the room. "We need to get closer," Zeke murmured. Priscilla considered the situation. "The ladies' retiring room is near their table," she noted. "I could walk past on my way there." "Be careful," Zeke cautioned. "Caldwell might recognize you. We've never met," she assured him, "and he's unlikely to pay much attention to a passing woman." She rose gracefully, moving with deliberate casualness toward the ladies' room. As she passed Caldwell's table, she slowed slightly, adjusting her shawl in a way that gave her a reason to pause momentarily. Zeke watched, tensing as Caldwell glanced up at Priscilla. The mining magnate's eyes lingered on her for a moment appreciatively, not with recognition before returning to his companions. When Priscilla returned to their table a few minutes later, her expression was controlled, but Zeke could see excitement in her eyes. "They're discussing a shipment," she whispered once seated. "Something arriving by train tomorrow night." Caldwell seemed concerned about security. "A shipment of what?" Zeke asked. They didn't specify. But Caldwell told the stranger someone named Tanner that once it arrives, our competition problem will be solved permanently. Zeke frowned. That could mean anything. There was more, Priscilla continued. Winters mentioned the unfortunate accident at Silver Moon and how it hadn't accomplished what they hoped. Caldwell said this new plan was foolproof. This was significant. It confirmed Western Star's involvement in the cave-in and suggested they were planning something else, something more serious. "We need to find out what's on that train," Zeke said decisively. "The station master might know," Priscilla suggested. Western Star would need to arrange for the shipment to be unloaded. "Too risky to ask directly," Zeke countered. "But I could check the manifest when the train arrives." As they discussed possibilities, Caldwell and his party rose to leave. The mining magnate paused, surveying the dining room one last time. His gaze fell on Zeke, and for a moment, a flicker of recognition crossed his face. Zeke immediately turned his attention to Priscilla, leaning forward as if sharing an intimate comment, his back now to Caldwell. When he chanced a glance over his shoulder a moment later, Caldwell was gone. "We should leave," Zeke said urgently. "I think Caldwell might have recognized me." They settled their bill quickly and exited the hotel, taking a circuitous route back to the Silver Moon Hotel in case they were followed. The night was clear and cool, the streets of Silverado quiet except for the muted sounds from saloons and the occasional passing rider. "You think he'll connect you to me?" Priscilla asked as they walked, her hand resting lightly on Zeke's arm. "Possibly," Zeke admitted. "If he asks around, he'll learn I was involved in your rescue, but he might also think I'm just passing through." At the hotel, they paused in the hallway between their rooms, both reluctant to end the evening despite the potential danger. "Thank you for dinner," Priscilla said softly. "Despite the circumstances, I enjoyed myself." "As did I," Zeke replied, suddenly very aware of how beautiful she looked in the soft lamplight, how close she was standing. "What do we do tomorrow?" she asked. "I'll watch the train station," Zeke decided. "The shipment must be important if Caldwell himself is overseeing it." Priscilla nodded. "I should return to the mine. The men will be ready to resume operations and my absence would be noticed." "Be careful," Zeke cautioned. "If Caldwell's suspects were onto him, he might accelerate his plans." "I will," she promised. "And you do the same." There was a moment, a heartbeat of silence where they stood looking at each other, the air between them charged with unspoken feelings. Zeke found himself leaning slightly forward, drawn by an irresistible pull toward her. Priscilla didn't move away. Her lips parted slightly, her eyes meeting his with a warmth that invited him closer. Gently, giving her every opportunity to withdraw, Zeke brought his hand up to cup her cheek. When she leaned into his touch, he closed the distance between them, pressing his lips to hers in a kiss that began tentatively but quickly deepened, as Priscilla responded with unexpected passion. Her arms slipped around his neck, and he pulled her closer, lost in the sweetness of her kiss and the softness of her body against his. For a moment, the danger they faced seemed distant and unimportant compared to the discovery of this new, profound connection between them. When they finally parted, both were breathing quickly, surprise and pleasure evident in their expressions. "I've wanted to do that since I pulled you from that mine," Zeke confessed, his voice husky. "I'm glad you finally did," Priscilla replied with a small, secret smile that made his heart race. Reluctantly, they said goodnight, each retreating to their separate rooms. But as Zeke lay in bed that night, It wasn't the threat from Caldwell that occupied his thoughts, but the memory of Priscilla's lips on his, and the realization that somewhere between rescuing her from the collapsed tunnel and this moment, he had begun to fall in love with her. The next morning dawned with a sense of urgency. Zeke and Priscilla met early for breakfast, their plans focused on the mysterious shipment due to arrive that evening. "The train from Sacramento is scheduled at 8:15, Priscilla informed him, having checked the timetable. "It's the last one of the day. I'll position myself near the station before it arrives," Zeke said, "but first I want to make sure you'll be safe at the mine." "Walter has doubled the security," she assured him, "and I'll stay in the office away from any underground areas." Despite her confidence, Zeke remained concerned. If Caldwell was planning something permanent, as he'd put it, the threat could come from any direction. "Take this," he said, removing a small derringer from his boot and placing it in her hand. "Just in case." Priscilla accepted the weapon without hesitation. "I know how to use it," she said, tucking it into her pocket. "My father believed every woman should be able to defend herself." "Smart man," Zeke commented, not for the first time. They parted after breakfast, Priscilla heading to the mine while Zeke set out to gather information about Caldwell's activities. He spent the morning making casual inquiries around town, presenting himself as a cattle buyer interested in local business opportunities. What he learned was troubling. Caldwell's influence extended throughout the county, from the sheriff's office to the bank to the town council. Those who opposed him tended to encounter misfortunes, businesses that failed, loans unexpectedly called in, even physical accidents. By mid-afternoon, Zeke had confirmed what Priscilla suspected. Marcus Caldwell would stop at nothing to get what he wanted, and what he wanted now was the Silver Moon mine. Zeke returned to the Silver Moon Hotel to rest before his evening surveillance at the train station. As he entered the lobby, the desk clerk called out to him, "Mr. Porter, a message was delivered for you." The note was brief and unsigned. "Western Star office, 3 p.m. Come alone if you want to protect her." Zeke checked his pocket watch, 2:45 p.m. The message could only have come from Caldwell or one of his men. It was almost certainly a trap, but if there was any chance it might reveal Caldwell's plans, Zeke couldn't ignore it. He considered sending word to Priscilla at the mine, but decided against it. If this was a trap, involving her would only put her in more danger. Better to face it alone and, if necessary, remove the threat to her directly. Checking his revolver and ensuring an extra derringer was secure in his boot, Zeke headed for the Western Star office. The streets were busy with afternoon traffic, shoppers and businessmen going about their daily activities, unaware of the tension building between the town's largest mining operation and its most determined competitor. The Western Star office was quiet when Zeke arrived, the front desk unmanned. A bell sat on the counter, but Zeke didn't ring it. Instead, he listened, hearing muffled voices from the back office, his hand resting near his revolver. Zeke moved quietly through the outer office toward the sound. The door to Winter's office was ajar, and through the opening, Zeke could see the business manager seated at his desk, facing Marcus Caldwell. "Don't like improvising," Winters was saying. "The plan was set." "Plans change," Caldwell replied dismissively. "Porter's involvement complicates things. We need to neutralize him before proceeding." "He's just a cowboy," Winters protested. "What threat could he pose?" "That cowboy has a reputation as a tracker and a gunman," Caldwell said. "And he's taken a particular interest in Miss Garner. I've seen how he looks at her." Zeke's jaw tightened at the implication, but he remained still, continuing to eavesdrop. "What about the shipment?" Winters asked. "It arrives tonight as planned," Caldwell confirmed. 12 crates of dynamite enough to, he stopped abruptly, his gaze shifting to the door. We have company, he said, reaching for a drawer in Winter's desk. Zeke reacted instantly, pushing the door open and drawing his revolver in one smooth motion. Keep your hands where I can see them, Caldwell, he ordered. Caldwell froze, his hand halfway to the drawer. Winters looked terrified, shrinking back in his chair. Porter, Caldwell said, his tone conversational despite the gun pointed at him. I thought you might accept my invitation. Wasn't hard to figure out who it was from, Zeke replied. What's the dynamite for, Caldwell? The mining magnate's eyes narrowed slightly, the only indication that he was surprised by Zeke's knowledge. Mining requires explosives, he said smoothly. Surely you know that. 12 crates is enough to level a mountain, Zeke countered, or collapse an entire mine with everyone in it. Caldwell's expression hardened. You're making dangerous accusations, Porter. And you're planning a mass murder, Zeke replied. The sabotage timbers weren't enough, so now you're going to blow up the Silver Moon with Priscilla and her miners inside. You can't prove any of this, Caldwell said coldly. I don't need to prove it to know it's true, Zeke said, and I won't let it happen. Caldwell's composure slipped, anger flashing in his eyes. You're a fool, Porter. You think you're the only one with a gun. As if on cue, Zeke heard the unmistakable sound of a revolver being cocked behind him. Drop your weapon, mister, a gruff voice commanded. Zeke didn't move, keeping his gun trained on Caldwell. Your man shoots me, you die first, he warned. A standoff then, Caldwell observed, a slight smile playing at his lips. But not for long. Tanner, how many men do we have nearby? 4 outside, boss, the man behind Zeke replied. Plus me and you and Mr. Winters. 7 against 1, Caldwell said. Poor odds, Porter. I've faced worse, Zeke replied, though he knew his position was precarious. Caldwell seemed to consider this. I believe you have, he said finally, which is why I'm going to make you an offer. Walk away. Leave Silverado today, forget about Priscilla Garner and the Silver Moon mine, and you live. Stay, and you'll be buried in an unmarked grave by sundown. And if I leave, what happens to Priscilla? Zeke demanded. Miss Garner will eventually see reason and sell to us, Caldwell said. Or she'll suffer an unfortunate accident like her father did. The casual admission that Jonas Garner's death had been murder rather than accident made Zeke's blood boil. You killed her father. Mining is dangerous work, Caldwell replied with a shrug. Accidents happen. Zeke's finger tightened on the trigger, his desire to end Caldwell's threats warring with his awareness that doing so would likely result in his own death at the hands of Tanner and the other gunmen. Here's my counter-offer, Zeke said, his voice steady despite his anger. You leave Silverado. Sell Western Star to someone who'll run it honestly and never come near Priscilla or the Silver Moon again. Caldwell laughed, a sound devoid of humor. You're in no position to make demands, Porter. Maybe not, Zeke acknowledged, but I've already sent a telegram to the U.S. Marshal in Sacramento with everything I've learned about your operation. Kill me, and you'll have federal agents investigating every aspect of your business. This was a bluff, but Zeke delivered it convincingly. Caldwell's expression flickered with uncertainty. You're lying, he said, though less confidently than before. Am I? Zeke challenged. I spent the morning gathering testimonies from people you've threatened or harmed. The marshal has names, dates, and detailed accounts of your methods. My death would only confirm everything I've reported. Caldwell's jaw tightened as he calculated his options. Winters looked increasingly nervous, sweat beading on his forehead. Boss, maybe we should reconsider, Tanner suggested from behind Zeke. If the marshals get involved, shut up, Caldwell snapped. I'm thinking. The tension in the room was palpable as Caldwell weighed his next move. Zeke remained perfectly still, his gun unwavering. Finally, Caldwell sighed. "Lower your weapon, Porter. Let's discuss this like businessmen." "Tell your man to back off first," Zeke insisted. After a moment's hesitation, Caldwell nodded. "Step back, Tanner, but keep him covered." Zeke heard the man move away slightly. It wasn't much of an improvement, but it gave him a fraction more room to maneuver if needed. "Now your turn," Caldwell said. Slowly, Zeke lowered his revolver, though he didn't holster it. "What do you really want, Porter?" Caldwell asked. "Money, a stake in the mine. Name your price." "I want Priscilla Garner and her people left alone," Zeke said firmly. "No more sabotage, no more threats, no more accidents." Caldwell scoffed. "You expect me to abandon a business opportunity worth millions because you've developed feelings for the Garner woman? Don't be naive." "I expect you to recognize when the cost of a business opportunity exceeds its value," Zeke countered. "How much is your freedom worth, Caldwell? Because if anything happens to Priscilla or anyone at Silver Moon, I'll make it my life's mission to see you hang." For a long moment, Caldwell studied Zeke, seeming to take the measure of the man before him. Whatever he saw apparently gave him pause. "You're serious," he said finally, sounding almost surprised. "Deadly serious," Zeke confirmed. Caldwell leaned back in his chair, his expression calculating. "Let me propose an alternative. I'll leave Silver Moon alone for 6 months. During that time, if Miss Garner decides to sell, she names her price, and I'll pay it fair market value, no coercion. If after 6 months she still refuses, we revisit the situation. And the dynamite shipment," Zeke pressed, "will be diverted to our southern operation," Caldwell said smoothly. "We have legitimate uses for explosives, Porter." Zeke didn't believe that for a moment, but the important thing was preventing an immediate attack on the Silver Moon. "I want your word, Caldwell," Zeke insisted. "In writing, witnessed, and notarized." Caldwell's eyebrows rose. "You don't trust my verbal assurance. I'm wounded." "You've given me no reason to trust you," Zeke said bluntly. "A written agreement gives me something to show the marshal if you break your word." After considering this, Caldwell nodded to Winters. "Draft an agreement. 6-month moratorium on any activities directed at Silver Moon Mine or its personnel, followed by right of first refusal at fair market value should Miss Garner decide to sell." As Winters nervously began writing, Caldwell turned back to Zeke. "You realize this is merely a delay, not a surrender." 6 months is a long time," Zeke replied. "A lot can happen." "Indeed," Caldwell agreed, his tone suggesting he already had plans forming for when the agreement expired. When the document was completed, Caldwell signed it with a flourish. Winters added his signature as witness. "This needs to be notarized," Zeke reminded them. "The town notary is 3 doors down." Winters offered under Zeke's watchful eye. The document was properly notarized, providing at least a temporary protection for Priscilla and the Silver Moon. As they returned to the Western Star office, Caldwell made one final comment. "You've won this round, Porter. But ask yourself this: how long are you planning to stay in Silverado? 6 months is a long time to put your life on hold for a woman you barely know." The question struck closer to home than Zeke cared to admit. His business and property were near Sacramento, 100 miles away. He hadn't planned to stay in Silverado beyond a few days. But that was before he'd met Priscilla, before he'd held her in his arms and tasted her kiss. "That's my concern, not yours," Zeke replied firmly. With the agreement secure in his pocket, Zeke left the Western Star office, maintaining a careful awareness of his surroundings in case Caldwell decided to renege on their deal immediately. But no one followed him, and he returned to the Silver Moon Hotel without incident. His next task was to inform Priscilla of what had transpired. She deserved to know the truth about her father's death and the temporary truce he'd negotiated with Caldwell. Zeke rode out to the Silver Moon mine, finding Priscilla in her office reviewing production reports. Her face lit up when she saw him, a reaction that made his heart beat faster despite the gravity of his news. "Zeke, I wasn't expecting you until this evening," she said, rising from her desk. He closed the office door before explaining what had happened at the Western Star office, including Caldwell's implicit admission about her father's death. Priscilla paled at this revelation, sinking back into her chair. "I suspected," she said quietly, "but I never had proof. Father was always so careful in the mine." "I'm sorry," Zeke said, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "If it helps, Caldwell will pay for it eventually. Men like him always do." She covered his hand with hers, drawing strength from his presence. "What about this agreement? Can we trust it?" "Not completely," Zeke admitted. "But it gives us time. 6 months to strengthen security here, to build alliances in town, maybe even to gather evidence against Caldwell that will stand up in court." 6 months, she repeated thoughtfully. "And will you stay that long?" There it was, the question Caldwell had predicted, the one Zeke had been asking himself since leaving the Western Star office. "I have responsibilities in Sacramento," he said slowly. "My ranch, my cattle business." Disappointment flickered across Priscilla's face, though she tried to hide it. "Of course, you've already done more than I could have asked." Zeke tightened his grip on her shoulder gently. "Let me finish," he said with a small smile. "I have responsibilities there, but they can be managed from a distance, at least for a while. My foreman is capable, and I can make monthly trips to check on things." Hope returned to Priscilla's eyes. "You mean?" "I'm staying," Zeke confirmed. "At least until we're sure Caldwell will honor his agreement, and maybe longer depending." "Depending on what?" she asked softly, though her expression suggested she already knew the answer. Instead of replying with words, Zeke leaned down and kissed her, a gentle, tender kiss that conveyed what he wasn't yet ready to say aloud, that in the space of 2 days, this remarkable woman had become more important to him than he would have thought possible. When they parted, Priscilla's eyes were shining. "I'd like it if you stayed longer," she admitted. "Much longer." The 6 months that followed transformed both the Silver Moon mine and the relationship between Zeke and Priscilla. With the immediate threat from Caldwell neutralized, they were able to focus on strengthening the mine's operations and security while exploring their growing feelings for one another. Zeke divided his time between Silverado and his ranch near Sacramento, spending 3 weeks of each month at the Silver Moon and 1 week tending to his business interests. During his absences, Priscilla threw herself into expanding the mine, developing the rich new vein that promised to make Silver Moon one of the most productive silver operations in California. Walter Bailey proved invaluable, overseeing the day-to-day mining operations with efficiency and loyalty. Under his supervision, production increased steadily and profits soared. Priscilla used some of this new wealth to improve conditions for the miners, providing better housing, a company store with fair prices, and even a small hospital staffed by a competent doctor. These improvements earned her even greater loyalty from her workers and began to shift public opinion in Silverado. Merchants and townspeople who had once been firmly in Caldwell's camp began to appreciate the prosperity that Silver Moon brought to the community. Zeke, for his part, became a familiar and respected figure in town. His reputation as the man who had rescued Priscilla from the mine collapse was enhanced by stories of how he had stood up to Marcus Caldwell. Though he never sought attention, his quiet strength and fairness made him something of a local hero. As for Marcus Caldwell, he maintained a grudging adherence to the agreement. Western Star made no further attempts to sabotage the Silver Moon, though Caldwell himself remained a cold, distant presence in town, watching and waiting for the 6 months to expire. On a personal level, Zeke and Priscilla's relationship deepened with each passing day. They took evening rides through the hills surrounding Silverado, picnicked by the clear streams that fed the valley, and shared quiet dinners where they discussed everything from mining techniques to cattle breeding to literature. Zeke discovered that Priscilla had a brilliant mind, equally adept at analyzing ore samples and debating the merits of Dickens versus Twain. She, in turn, was charmed by his practical wisdom, his gentle humor, and the tender consideration he showed her at every turn. 3 months into their courtship, on a moonlit night when they had ridden to a hilltop overlooking the town, Zeke finally put into words what had been growing in his heart since the day he pulled her from the collapsed tunnel. "I love you, Priscilla," he said simply, holding her close as they watched the stars. "I never expected to find someone like you, especially not buried in a silver mine." She laughed softly at his gentle joke, then turned in his arms to face him. "And I love you, Ezekiel Porter. You've brought light into my life when I thought I'd lost everything that mattered." Their kiss that night was a promise, an acknowledgement that what had begun in crisis had blossomed into something enduring and profound. A month later, Zeke proposed, offering not a traditional diamond ring but a unique creation he'd commissioned from a San Francisco jeweler, a silver band inlaid with small, perfect sapphires that matched his eyes. The silver, he told her with a smile, had come from the first samples of the new vein at Silver Moon. "It seemed fitting," he explained as he slipped it onto her finger, "that your mine, which brought us together, should be part of our engagement." Priscilla's joyful acceptance was immediate and heartfelt. They agreed to marry in 2 months' time, as soon as the 6-month agreement with Caldwell expired. It would be, they decided, a way of celebrating not just their union but their triumph over the man who had threatened everything Priscilla held dear. As the wedding preparations progressed, however, an undercurrent of tension returned to Silverado. Caldwell, aware that his deadline was approaching, began making his presence felt more strongly in town. New men, hard-looking strangers with guns prominently displayed, appeared at the Western Star offices. Rumors circulated that Caldwell was planning something significant when the agreement expired. 1 week before the wedding and 9 days before the 6-month mark, Zeke returned from his monthly trip to Sacramento to find Priscilla unusually agitated. "What's wrong?" he asked as they sat in her office at the mine. "I received a visit from Harold Winters yesterday," she told him. "He delivered an offer from Caldwell to buy the Silver Moon." Zeke frowned. "The agreement still has over a week to run." "Apparently Caldwell considers a purchase offer to be outside its terms," Priscilla explained. "He's offering twice what the mine is worth on paper." "That's a generous offer," Zeke acknowledged. "What did you tell Winters?" "That the Silver Moon isn't for sale at any price," she said firmly. "This mine is my heritage and my future our future. I won't sell it to the man who murdered my father, no matter how much he offers." Zeke nodded, proud of her determination but concerned about the implications. "Caldwell won't take rejection well," he warned. "And once the agreement expires, he'll feel free to resume his tactics." "I know," Priscilla said. "That's why I've been working on something while you were away." She removed a document from her desk drawer and handed it to Zeke. It was a letter from the United States Marshal's office in Sacramento, acknowledging receipt of evidence regarding illegal activities by Marcus Caldwell and Western Star Mining, and confirming that an investigation would commence immediately. "How did you manage this?" Zeke asked, impressed. Remember Jacob Turner, the miner who left Western Star last month, Priscilla said. He came to me with information documents he'd smuggled out, proving Caldwell has been bribing officials and falsifying assay reports to attract investors. I sent it all to the marshal, along with our suspicions about my father's death. Zeke's admiration for her resourcefulness deepened. This could be the leverage we need, he said, but it also makes Caldwell more dangerous. If he learns you've gone to the authorities, he already suspects, Priscilla interrupted. Winters hinted as much during his visit. That's why I think the purchase offer was a last attempt to silence me legally before taking more drastic measures. Zeke considered their options. We need to accelerate our plans, he decided, both the wedding and the security arrangements. What do you suggest? Priscilla asked. Move the wedding up to this Sunday, Zeke proposed. And immediately afterward, we'll both leave for Sacramento, where the marshal can provide protection while the investigation proceeds. Priscilla hesitated. I don't want to abandon the mine or our home here. It would be temporary, Zeke assured her, just until Caldwell is dealt with legally. Walter can manage operations in your absence. After further discussion, they agreed on the plan. The wedding would be moved up to Sunday 3 days away, and they would depart for Sacramento immediately after the ceremony. Word of the change spread quickly through Silverado, as did rumors about the reason behind it. By Saturday evening, the entire town was buzzing with speculation about a confrontation between Ezekiel Porter and Marcus Caldwell. The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, with a sky so blue it seemed to promise nothing but happiness. Priscilla prepared in her room at the Silver Moon Hotel, assisted by the wife of the town doctor, who had become a dear friend over the past months. Her wedding dress, ordered from San Francisco, was a creation of ivory silk with delicate silver embroidery, another nod to the mine that had shaped her life. Her auburn hair was arranged in an elegant style adorned with small white flowers, and around her neck she wore a silver pendant that had belonged to her mother. Zeke, dressed in a new black suit with a silver brocade vest, waited nervously at the small church that served the community. The building was filled to capacity with miners from Silver Moon, townspeople who had come to respect the couple, and friends Zeke had made during his months in Silverado. As the ceremony began and Priscilla walked down the aisle toward him, Zeke felt a surge of emotion so powerful it nearly overwhelmed him. This woman, intelligent, brave, and more beautiful than he had words to express, was about to become his wife. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The exchange of vows was simple and heartfelt. When Zeke slipped the wedding band a companion to the engagement ring, crafted from the same silver onto Priscilla's finger, his hands were steady, his commitment absolute. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the minister declared. You may kiss your bride. Their kiss was met with enthusiastic applause from the gathered guests, many of whom had witnessed the beginning of their relationship in the aftermath of the mine collapse. The celebration that followed at the Grand Hotel was joyous, though an undercurrent of tension remained. Zeke noticed several of his friends, miners who had appointed themselves unofficial security, keeping watch at the doors and windows. Marcus Caldwell had not been invited, of course, but no one was certain he would respect the occasion by staying away. As the afternoon progressed with no sign of trouble, Zeke began to relax slightly. Their plan to leave for Sacramento immediately after the reception remained in place, with horses already saddled and waiting behind the hotel for a quick departure. Priscilla was radiant as she moved among the guests, accepting congratulations and good wishes. When she returned to Zeke's side, her eyes were bright with happiness despite the circumstances. "No regrets about the rushed ceremony?" he asked softly. "None," she assured him, squeezing his hand. "Though I do wish we could have a proper honeymoon instead of a dash to Sacramento." "We'll have that too," Zeke promised. "Once Caldwell is dealt with, we'll go wherever you want, San Francisco, even New York if you'd like." "I'd be happy anywhere as long as it's with you," she replied, leaning up to kiss him lightly. The moment was interrupted by Walter Bailey approaching with an urgent expression. "Sorry to disturb you," he said in a low voice, "but there's someone outside asking to speak with you both. Says it's important." "Who is it?" Zeke asked, instantly alert. "Harold Winters," Walter replied. "He's alone as far as we can tell." Zeke and Priscilla exchanged glances. Caldwell's business manager showing up at their wedding was unexpected and concerning. "I'll speak to him," Zeke decided. "You stay here." "We'll both go," Priscilla countered firmly. "We're partners now, remember." Recognizing the determination in her voice, Zeke nodded. "Together, then. But we stay in sight of Walter and the others." They followed Walter to a side entrance of the hotel where Harold Winters waited, looking uncomfortable and nervous. The business manager had aged visibly in the past 6 months, his face lined with stress, his once immaculate appearance now slightly disheveled. "Mr. and Mrs. Porter," he greeted them formally. "My apologies for intruding on your celebration." "What do you want, Winters?" Zeke asked bluntly. Winters glanced around as if checking for observers. "I came to warn you," he said in a low voice. "Caldwell knows about the marshal's investigation. He's desperate and dangerous." "We're leaving for Sacramento within the hour," Zeke informed him. "The marshal's office will provide protection." "You might not make it that far," Winters cautioned. "Caldwell has men watching the roads. He's determined that neither of you will testify against him." Priscilla's hand tightened on Zeke's arm. "Why are you telling us this?" she demanded. "You've been Caldwell's loyal employee for years." Winters sighed, suddenly looking much older than his 50 years. "I've done many things for Marcus Caldwell that I'm not proud of," he admitted. "But I draw the line at murder. When he started talking about eliminating witnesses, I couldn't be part of that." "So you've turned against him?" Zeke asked skeptically. "I've given my statement to the marshal's office," Winters confirmed. "Delivered it personally during a trip to Sacramento last week. That's why I'm here now, to help you escape before Caldwell realizes I've betrayed him." Zeke studied the man carefully, looking for signs of deception. Finding none, he turned to Walter. "Change of plans," he said. "We need a diversion. Can you arrange for 2 riders roughly our size to leave town openly, heading toward Sacramento?" Walter nodded. "Easily done." "And where will you 2 actually go?" "There's a back trail through the hills," Winters interjected. "It's longer but less traveled. It eventually joins the main road about 20 miles outside Sacramento." "You know this trail?" Zeke asked. Winters nodded. "I can guide you." Zeke considered the offer. Trusting Caldwell's business manager was risky, but if Winters had indeed turned against his employer, his knowledge could be invaluable. "Very well," Zeke decided, "but one false move and you'll regret it." "Understood," Winters said grimly. "We should leave as soon as possible. Caldwell has called a meeting at the Western Star office at 6. That's our window." The next hour was a flurry of activity. Priscilla changed from her wedding dress into practical riding clothes while Zeke organized their departure. Walter arranged for 2 minors to pose as the newlyweds, departing ostentatiously by the main road, while a small celebration continued at the hotel, to maintain the illusion that Zeke and Priscilla were still present. As dusk fell, the real newlyweds slipped out the back of the hotel with Winters, mounted fresh horses, and headed into the hills behind Silverado. Priscilla carried a small bag containing only essentials and the evidence against Caldwell. Zeke was armed with his revolver and a rifle, unwilling to take chances with his new wife's safety. The trail Winters led them to was indeed less traveled, a narrow path that wound through pine forests and rocky outcroppings. They rode in silence for the first hour, each lost in their own thoughts. For Zeke and Priscilla, the bittersweet nature of spending their wedding night fleeing from danger was tempered by the knowledge that they were together, facing whatever came as husband and wife. As night deepened around them, Winters finally broke the silence. "We should rest the horses soon," he suggested. "There's a small cabin about a mile ahead, a line shack used by hunters. It would be safe to stop there for a few hours." "Is it used regularly?" Zeke asked. "Would anyone know to look for us there?" "It's abandoned most of the year," Winters assured him, "and it's not on any map I know of." The cabin, when they reached it, was indeed isolated and showed no signs of recent use. It was a simple one-room structure with a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table and chairs, and a narrow cot along one wall. While Priscilla tended to the horses, Zeke checked the cabin thoroughly, ensuring there were no unwelcome surprises. Satisfied, he helped Winters gather firewood, keeping a watchful eye on the business manager. "Why did you stay with Caldwell so long?" Zeke asked as they worked. "You seem like an educated man. You must have known what kind of person he is." Winters sighed. "It happened gradually," he admitted. "When I first joined Western Star, Caldwell was ambitious but not criminal. Over the years, as his power grew, so did his willingness to cross lines. By the time I realized how far he'd gone, I was complicit in enough to make leaving dangerous." "What changed?" Zeke pressed. "Why turn against him now, Jonas Garner?" Winters said quietly. "I didn't know Caldwell had arranged his death until recently. Jonas and I were friends once, before Western Star and Silver Moon became competitors. When I learned Caldwell had ordered his accident, something broke in me." Priscilla, who had approached silently, heard this last part. "You were friends with my father," Winters nodded, unable to meet her eyes. "In the early days when you were just a child. We prospected together briefly before he found the Silver Moon claim." "He never mentioned you," Priscilla said, her tone neutral. "We drifted apart when I joined Western Star," Winters explained. "Your father disapproved of Caldwell even then." "He was a good judge of character," Priscilla observed. "Better than I was," Winters agreed sadly. Inside the cabin, they built a small fire and shared a simple meal of jerky, bread, and dried fruit that Zeke had packed. The atmosphere was subdued, the reality of their situation weighing on all three of them. "Try to get some rest," Zeke told Priscilla when they had finished eating. "You take the cot. Winters and I will take turns keeping watch. I'm not sure I can sleep," Priscilla admitted, "but I'll try." She settled on the cot and Zeke covered her with a blanket, bending to kiss her forehead tenderly. "Some honeymoon, eh?" he whispered. "We're together," she replied softly. "That's what matters." Zeke took the first watch, positioning himself near the cabin's single window where he could observe the approach trail. Winters sat at the rough table, his expression distant, occasionally adding small sticks to the fire to maintain its warmth without creating too much smoke. Several hours passed uneventfully. Priscilla fell into a light sleep despite her concerns, the exhaustion of the day finally catching up with her. Winters dozed at the table, his head resting on his arms. Zeke remained alert, his senses attuned to the night sounds of the forest. When a twig snapped outside, breaking the natural rhythm of nocturnal noises, he was instantly on his feet, gun drawn, motioning for Winters to stay silent. Zeke moved to the side of the window, peering out cautiously. The moon had risen, casting silver light across the small clearing in front of the cabin. For a moment he saw nothing unusual, then a shadow moved between the trees. "We've got company," Zeke whispered, moving to wake Priscilla. "At least one person approaching from the north." She was instantly alert, reaching for the derringer he had given her. "Caldwell's men, most likely," Zeke confirmed. "Get your things. We need to be ready to move." Winters had gone pale. "How did they find us?" he murmured, more to himself than to them. "That's a good question," Zeke said, suddenly suspicious. He turned to the business manager, his revolver now pointed in his direction. "Did you lead them here, Winters?" "No," Winters protested, his expression horrified. "I swear I had nothing to do with this." Then how a voice called from outside, interrupting Zeke's accusation. "Harold, we know you're in there with the Porters. Come out now and maybe Caldwell will show mercy." Winters slumped in his chair. "It's Tanner," he said miserably. "Caldwell's head of security." "How many men does he usually work with?" Zeke asked, moving to check the back of the cabin. "3 or 4, Winters replied. "All experienced gunmen." Zeke quickly assessed their situation. The cabin had only the front door and a single window. It offered decent protection from bullets but could easily become a trap if their attackers decided to wait them out or worse, set the structure on fire. "Is there another way out of here?" Zeke asked Winters. The business manager shook his head. "Just the door." Zeke made a decision. "We're not waiting for them to surround us," he said. "Priscilla, stay low and away from the window. Winters, you're with me." "What are you planning?" Priscilla asked, her voice steady despite the danger. "We're going to create a distraction," Zeke explained. "Then make a run for the horses." "I'm not leaving you," Priscilla insisted. "We're leaving together," Zeke assured her. "But I need you ready to move fast when I give the signal." Outside, Tanner called again. "Last chance, Harold. Send out the Porters and you can walk away." Zeke moved to the table and scribbled a quick note on a scrap of paper, which he handed to Priscilla. "If anything happens to me, get this to the marshal in Sacramento. It explains everything we know about Caldwell." She took the paper, tucking it securely into her bodice, but her expression was determined. "Nothing is going to happen to you," she said firmly. "We're going to get through this." Zeke kissed her quickly, then turned to Winters. "Ready?" The business manager looked terrified but nodded. "Here's the plan," Zeke said. "I'll create a distraction out the front. Winters, you take Priscilla out the back, staying low. Get to the horses as quietly as possible and be ready to ride." "What kind of distraction?" Winters asked nervously. In answer, Zeke moved to the fireplace and grabbed a burning log. "The kind that demands attention," he said grimly. Before either of them could question his plan further, Zeke kicked open the cabin door and hurled the flaming log as far as he could toward the trees where he had seen movement. In the same motion, he fired 2 shots in the same direction, then dove back inside as return fire splintered the doorframe. "Now," he shouted to Winters and Priscilla. "Go!" Winters hesitated only a moment before grabbing Priscilla's arm and pulling her toward the back of the cabin. Zeke provided covering fire, shooting through the window to keep Tanner and his men pinned down. The flaming log had caught the dry underbrush on fire, creating exactly the distraction Zeke had hoped for. Shouts of alarm came from the trees as Caldwell's men scrambled to avoid the rapidly spreading flames. Taking advantage of the confusion, Zeke backed toward the rear of the cabin, continuing to fire occasionally to maintain the illusion that all 3 of them were still inside. When he reached the back wall, he found that Winters and Priscilla had created an exit by removing several loose boards. "Clever," he murmured, slipping through the opening. Outside, he found Priscilla already mounted, holding the reins of his horse. Winters was nowhere to be seen. "Where's Winters?" Zeke asked as he swung into the saddle. "He said he'd lead them away," Priscilla explained. "Took off in that direction." She pointed south, away from their planned route. Zeke was surprised by the business manager's apparent sacrifice but had no time to dwell on it. "We need to move," he urged. "The fire won't distract them for long." They spurred their horses into a gallop, heading east through the trees, away from both the cabin and the direction Winters had taken. Behind them, the shouts and gunfire continued, suggesting that Tanner and his men were still focused on the cabin and the fire that now threatened to engulf it. For hours, they rode hard through the night, following game trails and dry stream beds, doing everything possible to obscure their trail. Dawn found them miles from the cabin, in a high mountain meadow where they paused briefly to rest the horses. "You think Winters made it?" Priscilla asked, watching the sunrise paint the distant peaks gold. "I don't know," Zeke admitted. "It was brave of him to draw them off, if that's truly what he did." "You still don't trust him," Priscilla observed. "It's convenient that Caldwell's men found us so quickly," Zeke pointed out. "Winters could have planned the whole thing, getting us isolated, then signaling Tanner somehow. But why lead us away from the cabin before they attacked? And why sacrifice himself to help us escape?" Zeke had no answer for that. "Let's hope we make it to Sacramento so we can ask him if he survives." They continued their journey, now following the back trail Winters had described. It was indeed longer than the main road, winding through rugged country rarely traveled by anyone except hunters and prospectors. By mid-morning, they had descended from the high country and were approaching more populated areas. Farms and small homesteads appeared occasionally, though they avoided contact with anyone they saw, uncertain who might be allied with Caldwell. As noon approached, they reached a point where the trail joined a wider road, one that would eventually lead to Sacramento, though still some distance away. "We should rest the horses again," Zeke suggested, noting how the animals were tiring from the hard pace. "And ourselves. We've been riding all night." They found a small stream just off the road, sheltered by a stand of oak trees. While the horses drank and grazed on the lush grass, Zeke and Priscilla shared the last of their provisions. "Some wedding night," Priscilla said, echoing Zeke's earlier comment with a tired smile. "Not exactly what I had in mind," Zeke agreed, putting his arm around her. "I promise to make it up to you once this is over." "I'll hold you to that, Mr. Porter," she replied, leaning against him. They allowed themselves an hour of rest before continuing, both dozing lightly in the warm midday sun. When they awoke, refreshed but still weary, they prepared to resume their journey. As Zeke was tightening the cinch on his saddle, the sound of approaching horses made him freeze. Signaling to Priscilla to remain silent, he drew his revolver and moved to a position where he could see the road without being seen. 4 riders approached from the direction of Silverado, hard-looking men, with the dust of long travel on their clothes. Zeke recognized one of them as Tanner, Caldwell's head of security. "They must have tracked us somehow," Zeke whispered to Priscilla when he rejoined her. "We need to move now." They mounted quickly and rode in the opposite direction from Tanner and his men, staying off the road and using the trees for cover. But their tired horses were no match for the fresh mounts of their pursuers. Within minutes, they heard the sounds of pursuit gaining on them. "We can't outrun them," Zeke said grimly. "We'll have to make a stand." He spotted a rocky outcropping ahead that would provide some protection. "There," he pointed. "We can defend that position." They reached the rocks just as their pursuers came into view behind them. Zeke helped Priscilla dismount and sent the horses running with a slap to their rumps, a distraction for Tanner's men and a chance for the animals to escape. Taking cover behind the largest boulder, Zeke checked his weapons. He had his revolver with 5 rounds remaining and the rifle with a full complement of ammunition. Priscilla had her Derringer, a 2-shot weapon meant for close encounters. "Stay down," he told her. "I'll try to hold them off." "I can shoot too," she reminded him, her expression determined despite her evident fatigue. Zeke nodded, recognizing the futility of trying to protect her from participation. "Save your shots until they're close," he advised. "The Derringer doesn't have the range of my weapons." Tanner and his men approached cautiously, having seen their quarry take cover among the rocks. They spread out, trying to surround the position. "Porter," Tanner called. "There's no way out. Surrender now and we'll make it quick." "That's generous of you," Zeke called back sarcastically. "But I think we'll take our chances." To emphasize his point, he fired a warning shot that kicked up dirt near Tanner's feet. The gunman ducked behind a tree, and the standoff began in earnest. For the next hour, sporadic gunfire was exchanged, neither side gaining an advantage. Zeke was careful with his ammunition, making each shot count, while Tanner's men seemed content to keep the newlyweds pinned down while waiting for an opportunity. As the afternoon wore on, Zeke's concern grew. They had no water, limited ammunition, and no prospect of rescue. Eventually, Tanner would find a way to outflank them or simply wait until nightfall to make a final assault. "We need a new plan," Priscilla whispered during a lull in the shooting. Zeke nodded, his mind racing through options, none of them promising. "If one of us could slip away," he began, but Priscilla cut him off. "I'm not leaving you," she said firmly. "We face this together." Her loyalty touched him deeply, even as he recognized the danger it placed her in. "Together, then," he agreed. "But He was interrupted by a new sound, multiple horses approaching at a gallop from the direction of Sacramento. Tanner and his men heard it too, their attention momentarily diverted. "Could be reinforcements for them," Zeke warned, though he allowed himself a flicker of hope. The new arrivals came into view, 6 riders wearing the distinctive badges of U.S. Marshals, led by a man Zeke recognized with astonishment, Harold Winters. "Porter," a deep voice called out. "This is Marshal James Harker. Are you and Mrs. Porter unharmed?" "We're alive," Zeke shouted back. 4 gunmen spread out to your left and right. What followed was brief but decisive. Outnumbered and outgunned, Tanner and his men surrendered after a token resistance. The marshals disarmed them efficiently and bound their hands. When it was safe, Zeke and Priscilla emerged from their rocky shelter, both exhausted but unharmed. Marshal Harker, a burly man with a thick mustache and the weathered face of someone who had spent years in the saddle, greeted them with a nod. "Mr. and Mrs. Porter," he said. "Glad we found you in time." "How did you know where to look?" Zeke asked, still processing their unexpected rescue. The marshal gestured to Winters, who stood slightly apart from the group, looking both relieved and uncomfortable. "This gentleman rode into Sacramento at dawn, half dead from exhaustion, with a tale of Caldwell's plot against you. We set out immediately." Zeke approached Winters, extending his hand. "You led them away from us," he said, "then rode for help. I misjudged you." Winters accepted the handshake with a sad smile. "I've been misjudged most of my life," he said. "Usually for good reason. It feels nice to be on the right side for once." "What about Caldwell?" Priscilla asked the marshal. "In custody," Harker confirmed. "We arrested him in Silverado early this morning, based on the evidence you gathered and Mr. Winters' testimony. He'll stand trial for fraud, bribery, and conspiracy to commit murder." "And my father's death," Priscilla pressed. The marshal's expression softened slightly. "We're investigating that as well, madam. With Winters' statement and what we find in Caldwell's papers, we hope to build a case." "It won't bring him back," Winters said quietly, "but perhaps it will bring some justice." The group returned to Sacramento, where Zeke and Priscilla gave formal statements about everything they had experienced with Caldwell and Western Star. The evidence, combined with Winters' insider testimony, was overwhelming. Marcus Caldwell would spend many years in prison, his empire of corruption dismantled. With the immediate danger past, Zeke and Priscilla were finally able to begin their life together properly. They spent a week in Sacramento, enjoying the luxuries of the city's finest hotel, a belated honeymoon that, while brief, was all the sweeter for the trials they had overcome. When they returned to Silverado, it was to a hero's welcome. The town had followed the events through telegraph reports and newspaper accounts, and the citizens who had once been cowed by Caldwell's influence now celebrated his downfall and the couple who had brought it about. The Silver Moon mine flourished under their joint management. Zeke sold his ranch near Sacramento, transferring his cattle operation to land closer to Silverado. Together, they expanded the mine, modernized its equipment, and continued the improvements to workers' conditions that Priscilla had initiated. Harold Winters, granted immunity for his testimony against Caldwell, remained in Silverado, eventually becoming a respected member of the community. The knowledge and experience he had gained at Western Star proved valuable as he helped Priscilla and Zeke navigate the complex business of mining. Western Star itself was sold at auction, with the proceeds going partly to compensate those Caldwell had defrauded and partly to the county for public improvements. The new owners operated the mine honestly, creating healthy competition that benefited both operations and the town as a whole. 1 year after their wedding, a year filled with hard work, growing love, and the gradual healing of old wounds, Zeke and Priscilla stood together on the hillside overlooking Silverado. The town had grown, prospering from the silver that continued to flow from the surrounding hills. Their own home, built halfway between the town and the mine, stood as a testament to their permanent commitment to the community. "You ever regret it?" Priscilla asked, her head resting on Zeke's shoulder as they watched the sunset paint the sky in hues of gold and purple. Getting involved in a mine collapse and all the danger that followed. Zeke's arm tightened around her waist, his hand resting protectively over the slight swell of her stomach where their first child was growing. "Not for a moment," he said sincerely. "Finding you was worth digging through a mountain." "My hero," she said with a smile, turning in his arms to kiss him. And as the last light of day gilded the town below them, Ezekiel Porter held his wife close, grateful beyond words for the twist of fate that had led him to Silverado on that fateful day, and for every moment of their shared journey since, from the darkness of a collapsed mine to the bright promise of their future together.